The best of money matters. Under the radar.
You're tuning in to Money FM 89.3, and it's now time for Under the Radar with me, Chua Tian Tian. That's all about the payments landscape today as we speak to a global leader in real-time cross-border payments. Now, founded back in 2014, our guest for today is fintech player Nium, a company whose mission is to deliver the global payments of infrastructure of tomorrow, today. And there is an interesting story behind how the company came about. Well, the firm was born out of frustration after its co-founder, Prajit Nanu, faced numerous challenges in sending money from India to Thailand to arrange a bachelor's party for his friend. Now, a Thai resort had refused to use his credit card and had insisted on a bank transfer of $640. Get this, $640. And while you might imagine the transfer to be a relatively seamless process, Nanu's bank in India required an extensive list of documents to facilitate the transaction. But such issues may be a thing of the past. After all, Nium said its payout network supports 100 currencies and spans over 220 markets, 100 of which in real time. Now, funds can also be dispersed to accounts, wallets, and cards and collected locally in 35 markets. The firm also has a growing card issuance business available in 40 countries. Now, with its proposition and its extensive payment network, the San Francisco and Singapore headquartered firm achieved the unicorn status after a Series D funding round in 2021. It is valued at $1.4 billion as of September 2024. But why are we speaking to Nium, you might ask? Well, Nium had in November 2024 opened its new headquarters in Singapore. Now, Singapore headquarters will serve as the firm's strategic hub for the Asia-Pacific, the Middle East and Africa regions. So how far will the new headquarters position the firm for exponential growth? Did the firm also set up the headquarters here to be closer to its largest shareholder, Singapore's Temasek? And meanwhile, the firm also said then that it aims to go public within 2 years. Again, to what extent is the company on track to do so? Well, lots of questions, and joining me right here in the studio is Anupam Pahuja, EVP and General Manager of Asia Pacific, the Middle East and Africa at Nium. Anupam, welcome.
Well, Tian, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's good to hear all the great things you've talked about at Nium and believed to be very, very true.
Right. And before we get started, Anupam, I understand you were at PayPal previously. What led you to, Nium?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So I spent about 15 years at PayPal. I was responsible for setting up, most of the Asia business for PayPal, starting with India and then moving to Singapore. Post-COVID, it became quite apparent to me that there's value to be brought to the payment space in multiple different ways. So I actually moved to Vietnam for a year to be the CEO of a wallet company in Vietnam, and happened to be at a wedding party with our dear friend Prajit.
And so that was the party, was it?
No.
That's after.
This is much after. This is just a few years ago. This is 3 years ago.
Yes.
And at the party, one thing led to another. I loved the vision and the mission for Nium. And I requested Prajit, hey, when can I join? And in the morning, I was working for Nium. That's how I came to be at Nium.
Right. And, let's talk about the business, right, Anupam? We've briefly talked about how Nium, as a payments leader with that payouts network that spans over 220 markets, supports 100 currencies. But let's go back to basics. How would you describe Nium's product offerings, value proposition, and business model?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. And, I've spent most of my life in the payment space. I have 4 patents in the payment space. So I thought I knew everything there is to be known about payments until I actually came to Nium. The market that most companies target is the consumer-focused market, right? Nium is slightly different. It is focused on the business market, the B2B space. And just to dimensionalize those markets, the B2B money movement space across the globe is $150 trillion. I mean, I'll let you have that sink in for a second. That's a lot of money movement. Compare that to the consumer market, which is a fraction of what Nium is able to do from a B2B space. So what is appealing to me and what is appealing to Nium is the fact that this is a huge market space. That's point one. Second point is hugely, hugely inefficient. If I were to ask you, Tian, if you were to, let's say, take a Grab and you go to Singapore, you can pay using multiple ways for your Grab ride. You could take the same Grab ride if you go to, let's say, Indonesia or another market that Grab operates in, and you could still be able to pay and take a cab ride without a lot of friction. But imagine if you're a business and let's say you're buying something from Brazil and you're sitting in Singapore and you want to buy a container of clothes or apparel or any sort of thing. Now, it takes almost a week or week and a half for the money to move from Singapore to Brazil as a business payment. That's not the same in the consumer space, right? So there's huge amount of inefficiencies built into the business space. The amount of time it takes for the money to move, the effort that the person has to take. You physically have to go to a bank and say, hey, Mr. Banker, can you please move the money for me from my bank account to a bank account sitting in Brazil? And you don't know what the FX rate is going to be because it's going to be about a week before the money actually gets there. So inefficiencies, the size of the market, and the value in terms of the ability to have businesses move faster is the value proposition that Nium brings. What Nium does is it enables money movement across the globe. In like you said, 100 plus markets in real time. So meaning you press the button as a business and say, hey, I want to send money to country X. We're able to move that money in a matter of seconds as opposed to days or weeks from the traditional mechanism, right? That's the value proposition Nium brings. Market space is huge. Value proposition is immense. That's what's attractive about Nium.
Okay, let's talk about products first before we move on to customers, yeah? So zooming in on your product verticals, I understand they can be split into 6 categories, right? A lot of complex names that you've got here, global pay-ins, global accounts, global card issuance among them. So let's hear from you, which is the most important product vertical for the firm, ultimately when it boils down to the dollars and cents on your balance sheet?
Yeah, like many companies, we have multiple flavors of products, right? So, but broadly categorized, think about it in a very simplistic way. It's payouts, meaning you want to pay somebody. You have suppliers in China, you have suppliers in Brazil, as I said, or any other market. You want to send them money. That's called payouts, right? So we do payouts. The opposite of that is pay-in, meaning you're a supplier and you want to receive money, right? So one is push money out, one is pull money out. So payouts and pay-ins. The third part of it is issuing. We're one of the largest issuers of virtual credit, virtual cards in the world. We issue more than 50 million cards a year. And these are for specific business purposes. These are not consumer cards, but these are for specific business purposes. So broadly categorized payouts, pay-ins, and issuing.
And the remaining 3 functions like global FX, global account verification are just supporting functions, so to speak.
Exactly. What global FX is would be, as you're sending money from country A to country B, there is a FX translation that needs to happen. That's FX. Verification is a very unique product. We've just brought it to market. It allows businesses to know who they're sending money to before they send money. As payments have, the speed has increased, so has fraud. As you do things in real time, it's very difficult to retrieve the money. The inefficiencies of the past, meaning if it took you 7 days to send money from country A to country B, also help people reduce frauds because you had 7 days to get the money because it hadn't gone to the end beneficiary yet. But if you're doing it in real time, money's already there after you press the button, right? So it's very difficult to manage fraud. So our product, account verification product, allows you to verify the details of the beneficiary before you send money. So if I want to send money to Tian and I want to make sure it is actually Tian who's supposed to receive this money, we can do that prior to even touching the money. So that's the verification product. Very, very cool new product.
Which is the most lucrative product in your product lineup?
It's like you're asking a father to choose their children. All my children are favorite children.
Okay. So all of them have strategic importance. Let's keep it that way.
Exactly. You're very right.
Okay. Zooming in on customers now, Anupam, Nium's customers, as I understand, they can be broadly split into 3 groups. You have your financial institutions, being the banks, money transfer operators. You have platform and enterprises. And finally, travel-related players like your online travel agencies, your airlines. So, big question over here. What products do the various customers demand from you? Which is the most important consumer segment? And when we talk about importance, what is the average ticket size? Any names that you can share at this point?
Yeah, certainly. So the key market for us is broadly defined into two categories. One is, like you said, the platforms and FIs, and the second one is on the issuing side. We have OTAs and travel, airlines and such. On the first part, what we do is we enable large financial institutions and banks to compete with fintechs.
Wow.
Which tend to be a lot more nimble and faster than traditional banking systems. We give banks and financial institutions the tools that they need to enable them to be at par or if not better than other financial institutions. So, for example, you asked about the client list here. We have the top 4 banks in Thailand as my client. We have the top 5 banks in Indonesia as my clients. We have the top 2 banks in Singapore as my client. We have the largest Asian majors in the fintech space as my clients. So these are all using Nium's capabilities to improve their ability to send money across the board and build efficiencies into their system. Now, let me expand on that just a little bit. There are 4 inherent problems when it comes to moving money across borders that people face or companies face. First is the cost. The cost used to be very, very expensive to send money. And it's the fees associated with SWIFT and so on and so forth were pretty high. The second part is ubiquity. Companies were unable to send money across 220 markets. They could only send money to a few markets, and for the others, they had to depend on archaic systems. The third one is transparency. There's no transparency built into the inherent banking system. When you send the money and it takes a week for the money to get to the destination, what happens to the money in the middle, you don't know. And there's no way to figure out where the money is at any given point in time. The final one is speed. So it's cost, it's ubiquity, it's transparency and speed. These are the 4 inherent challenges that these large financial institutions and platforms face. And Nium solves these problems for these large institutions. So that's the first part of business. The second part of the business is the issuing side of the business. Now, this is a very, very interesting challenge and very prevalent actually in the payments in the travel space. So the largest market there for us will be the OTAs and airlines. What happens is, let's say Anupam goes to a OTA to pay for buying a ticket to fly to San Francisco as an example. Now, Anupam has already sent the money to the OTA, but now the OTA needs to pay Singapore Airlines.
Yeah.
Right? How will that OTA pay to Singapore Airlines? It's the second leg of payments. It's the B2B payments. That's where Nium plays a role by issuing virtual cards so that the payment happens very quickly and reconciliation of the payment happens in a very reasonable way. So issuing is very focused on the travel side. Now, by reports I've read, about 18% of the payments in the travel space, the second leg of payments, happen through these VCC cards that we issue, which is a pretty large chunk of change.
Okay. So the big question, if I can try my luck over here, if you were to look at average ticket size per transaction in terms of numbers, what would that be?
So typically, Nium, so small tickets, retail tickets, consumer payments is not where Nium excels at. So it's the larger ticket size. So if you look at the globe where retail payments are, then there are small size payments, what banks call them, and there are very large payments. So Nium doesn't excel in sending over multi-million-dollar payments. It's not what Nium's game plan is. So between the $50,000 to $200,000 payments, that's where Nium plays a critical role.
And don't
that's
mind
the
me
average ticket size.
Being the man in the street, do you charge a service fee or do you take a proportion of that deal size?
Yeah, so we don't charge anything to the consumers or to actually the receivers. The products are sold to other banks and to other financial institutions. Now, they have a way of charging their customers. So we're a B2B player.
Yes.
We're a white-labeled B2B player. So I will sell my products, for example, to a bank, and the bank will then choose to charge what they need to charge their customers.
Okay. And earlier we talked about a lot of different markets that you're in, Thailand, Singapore, and you mentioned, was it? Indonesia, that's right. Yeah. In fact, Nium, if we look at the firm on the whole, it holds regulatory licenses and authorizations in over 40 countries, co-headquartered in San Francisco and Singapore. Take us through your global presence. Which are the most important markets for you, financially or strategically? What are the roles of the Singapore and the San Francisco co-headquarters then?
Yeah, so I broadly categorize our markets into 4 different areas. One is our markets that we're existing are. These are our regular markets. Second is markets we call our growth markets, where we expect the growth to come from. The third categorization is markets where we want to experiment, right? We're not really sure if there is a product market fit yet, but we want to experiment. And the fourth category is do not touch markets, where we don't want to go, right? This could be your sanctioned markets, sanctioned countries. Some of them, they're sanctioned by global powers. And within these broad 4 categories, where we physically have boots on the ground, where people are physically, we have licenses or we have boots on the ground, are those 40 markets that you referred to. Some of them are growth, some of them are 26 markets is where we have boots on the ground. Now, they include, for example, in Asia Pacific, which is of interest, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Japan, Australia, Malaysia. So these are sort of India. These are the key markets in the Asian context. In the Middle East, we have boots on the ground, and for example, UAE. Then in Europe, we are in London, we're in Lithuania, we're in Malta, we're in Amsterdam. Then in Americas, we're in obviously America, United States, Canada, and Brazil, and other markets. So, and these are all within these. There are some markets that are where the growth is going to come from, I feel. And for example, in Asia, we're seeing a lot of momentum coming from Japan. We are one of the only few companies, maybe 1 or 2 companies, that have what's called a Type 1 license, which enables Nium to move large amounts of money over $1 million. There are not that many companies in the world that have the ability to do that or have the license to do that. Nium is one of them. So we're seeing a lot of desire for international companies to want to do business with Japan, and they are unable to. For example, China is a supplier to the world, but they have an inability to sell frictionlessly to Japan, right, to receive payment
because
from
of
Japan.
Licensing.
Because not a lot of people have that ability to send large amounts of money. So Nium is one of the very few companies that can. Another hotspot for us is Indonesia. Indonesia, with the large populace there, most of the banks want to move money in and out of the country, and we enable the banks to move out. Move the money in and out. Singapore, obviously, is our headquarters, is a strategic location for us. The entire world comes to Singapore to do business for Asia. So it's a very key market for us. The regulator here is forward-looking. The ability to do business in Singapore, the ease of doing business in Singapore is at par with anywhere else in the world. So Asia, those are the key markets for us. And then in Latin America is also another hotspot, whether it's Brazil or Mexico. These are extremely upcoming growth markets for us.
Because it's relatively blue ocean?
I would argue, yes, it is, right? And there is a bigger need. Where there are inefficiencies, that's where you can come in and play a role. Large countries have kind of figured out what to do. But large country to a smaller country, Mexico to U.S. has been figured out. But Mexico to maybe China, maybe not as much, right? So when you move money, there are 2 parts to the equation, where you're receiving money, where you're sending money. And in that corridor, we call it a corridor, there are inherent efficiencies. That's where we come and bring value.
And let's take a look at where things are at for Nium right now, yeah? So earlier we talked about how the firm is valued at $1.4 billion USD as of September 2024. Where are we right now here in Q2 2025? And don't mind me asking this, despite Nium being a privately held company, how profitable is the company? What are the key growth engines, particularly in Asia?
I talked about the markets that are growing for us in Asia and overseas already. So Nium is going to hit break-even this year to 2025. Our business is growing tremendously. As an example, we have quadrupled the size of large banks that use Nium in just 1 year.
Wow.
Right? Quadruple. So we're talking about multifold increase in the customer base. And what we're seeing is that there's a lot of startups who fixate on valuations and IPOs and so on and so forth. My view is slightly different. My focus is, if you build a business, you need to build a business for the long term, not for the short term. It needs to be durable, profitable business. It cannot be for short-term value accretion, right? So we as a company, or I as a person, I don't focus on what's my value today or tomorrow. What you don't want employees to do is get up in the morning and start looking at your share price, right? That's the last thing you want your people to do. You want to focus on building a endurable long-term business. And that's where my mindset is at.
So from the present, let's talk about the future, which you are very focused on, Anupam, because Nium in November 2024 opened its new headquarters in Singapore, the co-headquarters, and it is said to be the firm's strategic hub for APAC, the Middle East and Africa. How far will the new headquarters position you for exponential growth? That is one. And did you also set up the headquarters to be closer to your largest shareholder, Temasek, and your other backers, including Singapore's GIC? How will the role of Singapore as a market evolve in the longer term?
Yeah, I mean, so funnily enough, we're actually in the GIC building. We're in Capital Towers. That's where we're located. But I don't think it's proximity to investors that's important. What is important is the regulatory framework, the ease of doing business in Singapore, the strategic location of Singapore vis-a-vis our clients. That's of key importance to us. As I mentioned, we are a very, very highly regulated company. We touch people's money, and we ought to be highly regulated. We are located across from MAS, by the way. So Capital Towers is located diagonally opposite MAS, so they have a keen oversight over us. But kidding aside, Singapore is very strategic to the growth of the company. The proximity to do business from Singapore, right? If you want to go to Indonesia, to Malaysia, to Thailand, any of these markets is just a hop and skip jump away. The ecosystem that Singapore has been able to create for fintechs like us is just tremendous. We, for example, work very closely with ESG Enterprise Singapore, and they have taken us to multitudes of different markets, being a Singaporean company. And they've taken us to, for example, Saudi Arabia. They've taken us to UAE. They've taken us to Japan. Through the auspices and hand-holding of Enterprise Singapore, we have been able to do things and provided the credibility to do things that otherwise we would not have. I would argue there's no other government anywhere that acts like an enterprise as much as Singapore does. The transparency one has in terms of rules and regulatory and the law of the land, it really enables businesses like Nium to thrive. And that's the reason why we're in Singapore as a headquarters, not because some of our key investors are here.
Okay, now if you're just tuning in, we're in conversation with Anupam Pahuja, EVP and General Manager of Asia Pacific, the Middle East and Africa at Nium. And the reason why we talked about Singapore, we talked about growth, is because Nium's co-founder Prajit Nanu, he said in September 2024 that Nium increased its revenue by about 50% from the year prior to $120 million USD, and is on the charm offensive to expand into the UK, Canada, Latin America, and in Australia. You've talked a lot about the opportunities in some of these markets. So why do you think that this is a time for the firm to expand aggressively in the EMEA region, Asia, Middle East and Africa region specifically, with the support of your Singapore hub?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think why the time is right now. I think we are at a pivotal moment in the sort of growth of the company as well as the geopolitical environments around the world. If you sort of take a step back and see what's happening in the world, you'll see real-time payments take off in a big way. There are 40 countries around the world that are now providing domestic real-time payments. Singapore has Nets. Thailand has PromptPay. Mexico has Boleto. Brazil has Pix. India has UPI. So there is a desire and movement towards real-time payments around the world. And Nium is in the forefront of driving that change. What we see is that we have been able to make the change domestically. It's now so much easier. You can take a QR code and pay any vendor here in Singapore. But the same ease of transacting doesn't exist across borders. So what if, imagine, it was as easy to pay a vendor here in Singapore as it would be to pay another vendor, let's say, in another market in Japan. So the timing, therefore, because of the movement of real-time payments, is now for us, right?
Okay.
We have seen clients after clients after clients, and countries, in fact, come to us. I'll give you an example. Prajit was in Rwanda, as an example, just a few weeks ago along with other companies talking about setting up real-time payment systems in that market.
Wow.
So there's a desire for each country to go to real-time payments. And imagine if we are able to connect all of these countries together, just like credit cards is so easy to use anywhere you go in the world, payments should be as easy as well. So what Visa and MasterCard has done on the card rails, Nium aims to do on the payment rails.
Okay. And as far as we talked about organic expansion, right? The firm is also said to have expanded rapidly through M&As, the purchase of London-based, is it called Ixaris? Then you've got Singapore SoCash, you've got Wirecard Forex India. How far are acquisitions your preferred mode of expansion versus organic expansion? And how do you screen for the companies to buy and then integrate them, ease out the kind of kinks in the process of integration?
Yeah, I think, you have to look at a comprehensive business model. Who do you want to be, right? What is your vision? What is your mission? Once you have figured that piece out, then you got to figure out what can you do organically and what do you need to build by, right? It's a build or buy decision. And sometimes building it is easier, sometimes buying it is easier. So if there are gaps in your roadmap that you're trying to fill to achieve your vision and mission, that's where either inorganic or organic plays come in. Now, typically, Nium has been acquisitive, and we will continue to be that way. But that doesn't mean we don't do organic product growth. So, for example, the Verify product we talked about is something we built on our own. There's another product, we call it Swift Connect, that allows the banks to use Nium without having to integrate with Nium. So these large enterprises, they have a lot of bottlenecks when it comes to tech bandwidth. We enable these large banks to connect to Nium via the Swift channel. Swift is a big partner for Nium. So they just send us a Swift message, like sending Nium an email. And then we move the money around the world for these banks. So wherever we can build things and make sense for us to build things, we do that. Whenever it makes sense to buy, we do. But it has to be within the context of the larger vision and mission for the company. What fits where and how. The second part of your question that you asked is how do you work out the kinks in the system? I was with PayPal for 15 years, and I can tell you that, looking back, most of the acquisitions are very, very difficult to integrate, right? 6 out of 8 M&A transactions don't integrate well with the company. So we've had our share of challenges as well with the integration, but we are nimble and we are young, and we are able to work through the kinks in a faster way than a large corporate behemoth, I think.
Who is next on your shopping list? Or do you already have targets in your shopping cart just waiting? You're just waiting for the right time to press the right button to check out.
Well, it's for me to know and for you to find out, isn't it?
Okay. I love the response. Ultimately, Anupam, as we begin to sort of wrap up the conversation, Nium said in November 2024 that it aims to go public within 2 years. How far are the aggressive expansion moves that we talked about earlier also in preparation for that IPO? And to what extent is the firm on track to pursue an IPO by end 2026? What will the new capital be raised for?
Yeah, I don't think, like I said before, right, the companies, and it's not just me. It's just
always
any company.
growing.
Yeah, you have to focus on building a business. You don't have to focus on getting an exit. If you focus on getting an exit, you're going to make decisions that are not in favor of running a long-term business. So I never ever look at it, and I tell my people never ever to look at, is there going to be an IPO, is there going to be an M&A, whatever else. If it happens, when it happens, let it be. Build a business that is enduring and long-term and profitable. That's what our shareholders want us to do. And that's what we're on the mission to do.
So as you mentioned earlier, the last thing you want is for your employees to wake up to look at your share price every day.
You don't want distractions, right? You want to focus on building a business.
Okay. And before we let you go, Anupam, talk about building business. Keep us excited. What are some future plans for Nium for the rest of this year and possibly into the next? What can we look forward to in Asia and Singapore?
I think, we're razor focused on the 1 to 100 space, right? If you look at any scale-up or startup, there are 2 phases to the business. The 0 to 1 phase, we're trying to find product market fit, and the second phase is the 1 to 100 phase. How rapidly are you able to scale your business vis-a-vis competition? Because competition is not sitting around waiting for you. So our entire focus is how to get to 1 to 100 in the fastest way. How do we out-execute, out-maneuver, and get as many clients going on our product as possible in the quickest, fashion. So be on the lookout for multitudes of new announcements coming out from Nium from a client acquisition space. We have amazing plans for the year, and I'm looking forward to really focusing my team and myself on executing to these plans.
Well, thanks so much for the insights, Anupam. That was Anupam Pahuja, EVP and General Manager of Asia Pacific, the Middle East and Africa at Nium. Thank you so much for joining us on Money FM 89.3.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance. To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.